Man, it has been a while since I've actually reviewed a laptop, hasn't it? Actually, no. How long has it been? Wow. Okay. March 2022. That's more than a year ago. Okay, fine. It's definitely been quite some time, but the itch is back once more, and Asus has loaned me two of their laptops to help me scratch that itch. In front of me, I have the two new Zenbooks, the 14X OLED and the 14 Flip OLED. They're definitely more for the professionals on the go, something that I can definitely relate to as I myself used to have a Zenbook of my own, so it'll be interesting to see if these two are indeed a good choice for the professional road warriors. Let's get into it. So let's start off first with the more normal of the two, shall we? The Zenbook 14X OLED that I have comes with an Intel Core i7-13700H, so that's 6P cores and 8E cores for a total of 20 threads, 16GB of LPDDR5 4800 megatransfers per second of onboard memory, a 1GB PCIe 4.0 SSD by Micron, Wi-Fi 6E, and has a 14.5-inch OLED display, but you probably already figured that out. All of this is kept alive by a 70Wh battery, which isn't too bad. Onto its flippier cousin, the 14 Flip OLED that I have comes with an Intel Core i5-1340P, which is 4P 8E cores for a total of 16 threads, the same 16GB of LPDDR5 4800 megatransfers per second of onboard RAM, a smaller 512GB PCIe 4.0 SSD, also by Micron, and yes, also has Wi-Fi 6E and a 14-inch OLED display. Battery-wise, it is slightly larger at 75Wh. The 14X OLED sizes in at 322 by 255 by 22mm, 1.56 kilograms heavy, while the 14 Flip OLED is actually a bit smaller and lighter at 311 by 223 by 17mm and 1.52 kilograms heavy. The 14X OLED also comes with a 90W USB-C charger, while the 14 Flip OLED has a smaller 65W charger. Now, back when I used to have my old Zenbook, one of its quirk flaws was its metal body that was lacking in rigidity, so much so that I could warp it with my bare hands and it would no longer sit flush with the table and instead would just rock around. These new Zenbooks though have no such issue, as they're pretty solid and rigid all around and just feel good. They both also sport the same really nice and minimalistic design on the top with just some simple lines and the Asus Zenbook logo down on the corner. They're both also identical in terms of ports, with a USB-A 10GB per second port and a vent on the left, and two Thunderbolt 4 ports, a 3.5mm combo jack, and a full-sized HDMI 2.1 on the right. I know some older Zenbooks didn't even have a USB-A port, so you have no idea how happy I am to see it in these two. The speakers are bottom firing and we've got huge intake vents down on the bottom. Let's check out their cooling and upgradability, shall we? I have a feeling that Asus doesn't really want you to be taking apart these laptops because they're using Torx T5 screws, and in the case of the Flip, there's even two more Phillips heads hidden underneath the two rear feet, so don't get too excited with removing the back panel initially. Even with the panels off though, you won't be able to do much behind here. As mentioned earlier, the memory is on board, so you can only change the SSD and Wi-Fi card. We do get a good look at the cooling solutions though, and the 14X OLED gets an additional heat pipe and vent to help keep the 13700H cool. Both laptops can be opened smoothly with just one hand. I'd expect no less from a Zenbook, and of course, doing so reveals the beautiful OLED displays that are beneath them. They've both got a 2880 by 1800 16:10 aspect with 100% DCI-P3 color accuracy and use Gorilla Glass, but that's where their similarities end. The 14X actually has a 14.5-inch display with Display HDR 600, while the 14 Flip is the real 14-inch with Display HDR 500, and I actually like the 14X as it is this nice middle ground between 14-inch and 15.6-inch. Supposedly, the 14X is brighter by 50 nits at 600 nits maximum brightness versus the 14 Flip's 550 nits, but for whatever reason, I found the display on the 14 Flip to be noticeably brighter even on maximum setting, and the colors on the 14X look more color accurate and less bluish versus the 14 Flip, no matter which color profile I set them to in the My Asus app. There is also a sensor that increases the brightness of the display if viewing in direct sunlight, and in terms of dimness, the lowest setting on the 14 Flip can get pretty dark, so I wouldn't really use it for watching movies even in a pitch black room, but it's still adequate for reading or writing content of, black text on white background or vice versa. The 14X OLED, however, is even darker, and on its lowest setting in a pitch black room has almost got like this weird vignette sepia look on it, not gonna lie, with its brownish tint and the dark corners. The other big difference though is that yes, while both laptops are capable of going perfectly flat, only the Flip is capable of going all the way into tablet mode as well as anything in between. Being a convertible, it's also got not only a touchscreen but stylus support that Asus also includes in the package. This makes the 14 Flip pretty versatile, not just for reading content vertically in tablet mode, but also sketching on it at the same time, although I do have some gripes with this that I'll get into later. The stylus does need to be charged though, and you can do so by lifting the cap of the pen up to reveal the USB-C port for charging. The bad part though is that there is no place to attach the stylus onto the laptop, and at least for me, the digitizer on the screen was pretty noticeable as a kind of speckled grid, especially if you've got lighter content on screen. Right now you are hearing and seeing what I sound like on both of these laptops at the same time. Since both of them can lay kind of flat, I'm doing a little bit of trickery with my hands and how I hold both of them at the same time, so you can definitely see the differences between the two. The one thing I'm immediately noticing is that the Zenbook Flips looks like it has a wider field of view. It's less punched in, and the colors on them definitely look a little bit different. For example, if I bring it up against the sky right here, you can see the effects on both of them, and you can see definitely the quality differences between these two webcams and how they sound like. And yeah, let me know which you guys prefer, but I kind of like the wider look of the Flip, although I'm not a fan of the really oversaturated colors. All is not equal either when it comes to the keyboard. While they are similar in terms of layout with minimal flex down center, the keys on the 14X feel noticeably harder and sturdier. Either keyboard should give you a pretty good typing experience. I just found the 14 Flip to be a bit more wrathly in comparison. Both keyboards are backlit, and unfortunately both keyboards also have a bit of unevenness in terms of backlight that is quite noticeable. The touchpads are of the same size on both laptops, and I would say that they both feel pretty nice to navigate with nice actuation sounds and feels. But for me, the one thing that I really like about these Zenbooks is that their touchpads can turn into a numpad with a long press of the corner right here. This means easy number punching when doing data entry, but more importantly, for someone like me who is working in Blender, which if any of you guys actually do use Blender, you will know that it's quite a keyboard heavy shortcut application, and a lot of those useful shortcuts are on the numpad, so this was a big win for me. Speaking of software, they both also come with a couple of pre-installed software to no surprise, like McAfee, Microsoft Office Suite, and the usual slew of Asus and Intel software to help control and tune the settings on your laptop. For the most part, the 14X OLED is pretty standard, but the 14 Flip is where things got interesting. See, I took both of these laptops up with me for 3 weeks of game development on the go with my team, and the 14 Flip turned out to be pretty invaluable for those brainstorming sessions. Even if it was barely able to run Unreal Engine 5, being able to doodle level design ideas above screenshots with the stylus while the laptop was propped up in tent mode helped us to discover new ideas and just get really creative and flexible with our discussions. Like, I know it just sounds like me being paid to say nice things about this laptop, but no, I'm not getting paid, not even a cent, and admittedly, and I'm getting nothing in compensation. This genuinely happened and it was great for us. Things weren't exactly smooth sailing though. If the laptop idles long enough while in tent or tablet mode, when the screen turns off, touching the screen does not turn the laptop back on, and the only way to get it back is to press the power button, which, as you can imagine, while still kind of alright in tent mode, is just a bit annoying if you're in tablet or stand mode, as every time I let it go to sleep during my discussions, I had to lift it back up and press the power button again. Dealing with Windows shenanigans is also another pain point. You lock the rotation of the screen while in portrait mode, but why is it that it's grayed out when I'm in landscape mode? Also, if you lock the rotation while in portrait mode and you flip it back to landscape, the lock button gets grayed out as well, which means you gotta flip it back to portrait, then unlock it, then flip it back to landscape, which is downright annoying. As much as I really like these kinds of convertible laptops, sometimes I feel that, just Windows holds them back. Yeah. Anyway, let's get into the benchmarks. Starting with the SSD numbers, both SSDs are about the same in terms of write speeds, but the larger 1TB in the 14X OLED does twice the speeds in terms of writes. They're not the same SSD model though, so that has to be taken into consideration. 20 Cinebench runs in a row gives us a very good idea as to not only how powerful the processors in these laptops are, but also how effective their respective cooling solutions are at managing the thermal load. Bear in mind as well that the 14 Flip will run at a different long-term power limit depending on whether it's in standard laptop mode or anything else like tent or stand. Both laptops definitely throttle, but that's basically normal for laptops, especially in thin and lights. The numbers aren't particularly surprising too, with the 13700H in the 14X OLED scoring the best, then the 1340p in laptop mode, followed by the 1340p in any other convertible mode. What you're looking at here with the graphs is basically the 14X OLED starting off at 45 watts before quickly settling to about 30 watts, which is why you see the numbers dip quite substantially. The 14 Flip on the other hand starts at 33 watts, and depending on what mode you have it in, it either settles to about 26 watts when you're in laptop mode or 18 watts if you're basically in any other mode. Blender paints a more interesting picture however. Based on the Classroom, Junk Shop and Monster renders, while the render times for the 14 Flip predictably gets longer with each back-to-back run before it plateaus, the 14X actually gets faster. And yes, if 20 runs wasn't enough, I also ran it thrice, so 60 runs for each test, and each time the results show the same thing. This may have something to do with the 14X OLED having what Asus calls their ice-cool cooling system and having it kick in after a bit, so that's definitely an interesting result. During these benchmark sessions, both laptops didn't get too loud and the keyboard area remained comfortable enough to use. You're obviously not going to be doing any serious gaming on any of these laptops, but if you were going to anyway, then the 14X OLED would be a better choice as its Xe GPUs has 16 more CUs, which may not sound like much when comparing 80 and 96, but it does get better FPS and a score in Unigine heaven, and it's even noticeable when working in Unreal Engine 5, being the difference between choppy and a console like 24 frames per second. I'm not commonly too impressed by laptop speakers because they're traditionally pretty meh, so I found myself pretty happy with the speakers on these laptops as they've got sufficient mids and bass, and despite being bottom firing, have got pretty decent trebles as well, all while being adequately loud at maximum volume. You might also think that the 14 Flip with its i5 1340p gets better battery life versus its more powerful cousin, the 14X OLED with its 13700H, but in my test of just standard YouTube watching, listening to music, surfing and writing this review on it, the 14 Flip only lasted about 30 minutes longer than the 14X OLED. Indeed, not a huge difference, which could be attributed to the slightly more power efficient chip and the extra 5 watt-hours of battery. I mean, there are laptops out there with longer battery runtimes, so these results just aren't that exciting. The 90-watt charger on the 14X OLED allows it to charge up substantially faster at 2 hours and 23 minutes from 0 to full, with the 14 Flip trailing by more than an hour with its 65-watt charger at 3 hours and 28 minutes. Let's talk conclusions, and we can't do that without pricing. Zenbooks have never really been bang for the buck offerings. They're more like, the premium, sexy, thin and light with good specs, something to go up against, like a MacBook without costing as much. The 14X OLED that I have comes in at 5,099 ringgit, which is slightly below $1,300 while the 14 Flip OLED is priced at 5,499, which is just under $1,200. These laptops are obviously not for gamers, neither is it really appealing to students on a budget, but I think that the people who might be interested are, as I said in the intro, those who are constantly on the go and need something that is portable while not compromising on power. The 14 Flip OLED definitely has something going for it if you're an artist or designer, as it is convertible with a stylus. If you're one of those people, then I can tell you that the 14X OLED and the 14 Flip OLED are definitely laptops to keep in your shortlist, as they're light, they're solidly built, they look great, and they have a decent amount of power under the hood as well, if you're not gaming. Sure, there are and maybe cheaper options out there, but I mean, based on my experiences, cheaper can sometimes mean compromises. And I mean, just take a look at the Intel NUC M15 that I took a look at before. It doesn't feel as well built or feature packed as these guys, while costing roughly the same. Asus didn't pay me a single cent to say this, but to me, Zenbooks carry a bit of that, pedigree. Like, that you're getting quality with a Zenbook, and I'm not gonna lie, there are many laptops out there that don't look as sexy as these. That's pretty much it for me from this video. Do the usual thing of liking this video if you liked it, sharing, commenting, and maybe subscribing if you'd like to see more. My name is Yang, the Tech Rodent, and I will see you guys in the next video. Also, let me know what kind of videos you'd like to see. Reviews, repairs. I kind of like both. Yeah. I'll see you guys around.